Chapter 6 of the Oddball Tetrad of Grunvale, New Pork is now available on Stormy's Gallery. Visit stormysgallery.com today to jump into the story.
And you thought Peppa Pig was pandering kitty fodder. You ain't seen nothing.
One of the year's most enchanting stories is about to bloom. Don Bluth, the director of An American Tale, takes children of all ages on a wondrous and spectacular fantasy adventure that will delight and surprise you.
Are you threatening me?
A reputation can be a scary thing to get, and few places does this prove more true than in the field of filmmaking. Of course, most filmmakers don't make that big of a name for themselves. To most casual film audiences, their names are the visual equivalent of white noise, their credit merely serving as either the end of the opening credits or the beginning of the main on-end. Some paying attention to the credit sequences may react with mild surprise recognizing their name from another movie, but not think much beyond that. I mean, how many of you watching this video knew that Pleasantville and The Hunger Games were directed by the same person? But then you have the filmmakers that do become well-known names. Some of them, like Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, and Wes Anderson, become synonymous with quality, cinema at its finest. And even if they do put out the occasional dud, the rest of their filmography is highly regarded enough that it won't tarnish their good name. Other filmmakers nuke all the goodwill they may have earned before with one bomb of a movie. Michael Cimino with Heaven's Gate, Rob Reiner with North, and Tom Hooper with Cats. And then you have Don Bluth, who somehow managed to do both of these things. When considering his work in the 1980s, Bluth is a legend in the field of animation. On the film side of things, for MGM, he made The Secret of Nim and All Dogs Go to Heaven, the former of which has gone on to be regarded as one of the best animated films of the 1980s, and the latter of which went on to become one of the biggest selling VHS releases in the format's history. And for Amblin Entertainment, he made An American Tale and Land Before Time, both of which proved more successful than their respective years' animated offerings from Disney, where Bluth had previously worked as an animator before going rogue. Actually, fun fact, Land Before Time and Oliver Company weren't just released the same year, but the same day. November 18th, 1988. Barbenheimer 35 years before Barbenheimer. Olive... or... time. Doesn't work, moving on. Bluth is also a highly regarded name in the video game medium, being responsible for the animation Dragon's Lair, one of the earliest FMV games and the best known of the genre, seeing ports every console generation since its release in 1983. And also Space Ace, which is less acclaimed and less ported, but still pretty well known to fans of the mediums in which Bluth has worked. But then you have Bluth's work in the 1990s. One thing I've left out until now is that Don Bluth was and is known for his ego. This guy thought he was too good to work with Spielberg of all people, and decided to go rogue again after the success of his work with Amblin. The aftermath of this decision, however, proved to be one of the rare times where the rich Hollywood elite were right. Sure, staying with Spielberg meant less creative control, but it would have also meant financial stability and someone to tell him no. And as his 1990s filmography would prove, Bluth really needed to be told no, especially when it came to the biggest critical disaster of his career, A Troll in Central Park. Released at the zenith of Disney's renaissance and the idea of Bluth's dark age, A Troll in Central Park is a particularly infamous train wreck, not just among animated films, but among film in 1994 as a whole, and this is the same year that saw North and Clifford. So what does Troll have to compete with Kathy Bates in Redface and Martin Short in... Kidface? Well, you see the clips I'm showing. It looks like a joke, like a gag at a show like The Amazing World of Gumball would have to make fun of pandering kitty trash like Barney, Caillou, and Peppa Pig. But no, it is not a joke. It is a real movie, somehow coming from the guy who also directed The Secret of Nim. And everyone unfortunate enough to be associated with it knew they had a turd on their hands. Troll in Central Park began production in 1990, just as another Bluth bomb, Rockadoodle, was wrapping production. Bluth is quoted as having told his animators at the beginning of Troll's production to put the best work they could into the film, or they could plant themselves in another garden. And many of them did indeed find another garden at the Mouse House to work on the film they had in production. And if you consider the timeline, I think you can find out on your own why that move resulted in a better look on their resumes. Originally, both Troll in Central Park and Bluth's other 1994 release, Thumbelina, were to be distributed by MGM, like Nim and All Dogs before them. An early teaser trailer for Thumbelina, found on the Rockadoodle VHS, even bears the MGM print logo. However, they backed out when Bluth Studio filed for bankruptcy in 1992, leading both films to sit on the shelf for nearly 2 years until Warner Brothers picked them up for distribution. Wow, Warner Brothers picking up troubled animated projects. You never see something like that in the Zaslav era of the company. Not that things were much better in the 90s though, as would be shown from the way Troll was treated. Thumbelina, being a fairy tale adaptation like many of Disney's biggest films, and on top of that a Hans Christian Andersen adaptation starring Jodie Benson like the film that kicked off the Disney Renaissance, was released first, in March of 1994, whereas Troll on the other hand... I bet even the suits at Warner Brothers saw what they got themselves into picking up this sickeningly sweet scrap of stool, because they barely gave it a theatrical release, let alone any promotion, and as a result, the film ended up a colossal bomb, grossing only just over $71,000 on a budget of $23 million. Yeah, that's right, not 71 million, 71,000. Avengers Endgame made more money on opening weekend as a per-theater average. But of course, that's 1994 money compared to 2019 money, discarding a whole quarter century of inflation. Kind of an apples to oranges comparison. Which is why I found another comparison, this time to other 1994 money, that spells out just how pathetic Troll's total is. Troll in Central Park was released specifically on October 7th, 1994. That same weekend, Jurassic Park, in its 70th weekend at the box office, having already been released on VHS, made just over $283,000. Almost 4 times Troll's entire run. It doesn't get much more embarrassing than that. Aside from making the movie in the first place. To his credit, Bluth has since admitted that Troll is a shit movie. Unfortunately for him, and all of us, admission of wrongdoing is not a magic spell that undoes it. He made the mistake of bringing the movie into existence to begin with, and we the movie-going public are left with the bill. So let's see for ourselves what kind of weeds grow in Stanley's magic garden. As this film is apparently known in the UK. The film opens in the Kingdom of the Trolls, a bleak world whose inhabitants revel in their own repugnant behavior and where anything beautiful is banned by its ruler. So basically, Twitter. One troll, however, is affected by the joy virus from that one Tagam segment, and can make anthropomorphic flowers grow anywhere he touches with his literal green thumb. This is Stanley, the hero of our story, voiced by Dom DeLuise. To whom are introduced as he sneaks his flowers past many of the other trolls, including a guard who's so dim-witted he doesn't know how to look to the side.
Oh, for a minute, I thought I saw one of them flower things.
You know damn well that you did. It was standing right next to him. You'd have to have exceptionally bad tunnel vision to not see it. Like, so bad that it's drinking straw vision.
Oh well, have a rotten day. I'm a bad troll, a very bad troll.
Butchering the Volga River Burlock song by putting kitty lyrics to it. Yeah, I'm sure that wouldn't make them roll in their graves at all. So Stanley takes his flowers back to his tower, where we get a smell of just what he's like as a character.
Fresh September morning dew from the outside. You know, Violet, what this garden needs is a big rosy posy. Right there in the middle. And I'm just a sweet William, I mean Stanley, to do it.
Is that a joke? Tell me you're joking.
No, unfortunately, it is not a joke. This cutesy tone the movie has taken on is not something the movie wants you to find funny. This is the tone it's actually going for. Hard to believe this is the guy that directed Secret of Nim, isn't it? Let's loop back to Bluth's Amblin work for a moment, specifically Land Before Time, because it ties into a little theory I have about this movie turning out the way it did. For those that don't know, Land Before Time was heavily cut during production, down to the point where the final film is barely over an hour long. This is because, after watching an early cut of the film at a test screening, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas thought many scenes in the film, particularly involving the T-Rex fight and the main characters in distress, would be too scary for younger audiences, and as a result, over 10 minutes of footage, some fully animated shots, ended up cut from the film. Bluth himself has admitted he did not like how Land Before Time turned out, and has claimed he has a copy of the full film, deleted scenes and all, in his Well, come on up! In his possession. Bluth's dissatisfaction with Land Before Time of course led to him breaking off from Amblin and going rogue once again. Now don't use this video as a source for what I'm about to say, because I don't remember where I heard it, or even whether or not I just dreamt I heard it. But I recall hearing somewhere that Bluth made Troll out of spite for those who told him his movies were too dark. So in essence, Don Bluth himself was a troll, as in someone who deliberately tries to piss people off, with Troll in Central Park. If all this is true, then that would explain a lot about this movie, and what was going through Bluth's head when he made it. I just wish the movie itself was actually good, with something to say with its sickeningly cutesy troll, and not an anus-burning turd made for the same target audience as the f***ing Oogie loves. What target audience was that again, Animat?
It's like from sperm to fetus. No, from sperm... Yeah, sperm to fetus. It's a movie made for sperm to fetus.
Yeah, that. Anyway, Stanley grows a rose on a hill in his tower, which ends up growing so high that it blooms out the window. The guards, of course, don't take kindly to the sight, and quickly arrest Stanley.
You are going before the #1 flower hater in the land,
Norga? Are these trolls the reporters from Spyro the Dragon?
What about this Ganasty Gnork? Ganasty Gnork? Ganasty Gnork?
So, Norga, voiced by Cloris Leachman, is introduced to us as she sings her own villain song about how she loves being evil.
No flower shall grow, no face shall smile. It feels delicious to be so vicious. I'm Gnorga, the queen of mean.
And already she's failed as a villain. This is like villain writing 101. Never make a villain be evil just for the sake of it. You have to give them a proper motivation for what they do. Otherwise, you're just writing a joke villain. Even My Little Pony understood this. Why did Nightmare Moon want to bring about Eternal Night? She felt shunned seeing her subjects sleep through the time of day she ruled. Why did Discord want to cause chaos? Because he's the spirit of disharmony and that was his natural urge. Why did Queen Chrysalis brainwash Shining Armor and imprison Princess Cadence? She was a creature that fed on love and wanted to rule over Equestria. This is My Little Pony we're talking about. My Little Pony came up with believable motivations for shrouding the world in darkness, causing trouble, and taking over the world. 3 of the most cliched villain plots, and the easiest to write badly, and yet the show managed to get us to take them seriously. Gnorga just wants to do evil for the sake of doing it, hates flowers just because she can. I'd have taken anything, flowers killing her grandma. Would have been stupid, but it would have been something. But no, nothing of quality grows in this movie. This is the kind of character that'll scratch their bug bites or refuse to wash their hands because they're evil. And unlike with Tilly Green and The Flash, it wouldn't be presented as a joke. Oh, and Gnorga has a magic thumb of her own. One that turns those she touches with it to stone.
Queen of mean, I'm the meanest queen you've ever seen. You should have no doubt about my clout.
Gotta say, that magic was quite polite to wait for the bat to land safely on that gargoyle before it engulfed their entire body. So Stanley is brought to trial before Gnorga, who insists on turning him to stone, demonstrating her power on the tortoise she's riding. Tortoises are their shells, movie. It's not a thing they can just take off when they please. Gnorga's lisping and stuttering husband Lort, however, suggests to instead send him to a place of rock and steel that he believes being imprisoned in would be worse than petrification.
It will be worse than stone. It will be slow. It will be painful. It will be...
Oh, just think about what they'll say about you in the newspapers. Why, it's a shoo-in for the tabloids.
I think the tabloids would be more interested in slandering Stanley directly than presenting facts about the trial. Yes, Gnorga can also do whatever that was with her thumb. These magic thumb powers are going to be a bigger problem with the story later on, so let's put that on the back burner before it comes time to talk about them. So Stanley is sent off to New York City, during which we get these shots that would age badly 7 years after this movie's release, where he lands in Central Park. Initially pleasantly surprised to see that it's not the place of rock and steel Lort built it up to be, the mood quickly changes when he has a run-in with a vicious dog, kicking off a Genera brand variant of a comedic chase scene. You know, where instead of effective slapstick, we have Stanley running around grunting and screaming. And also this restaurant patron almost chopping his ass off. A bit that probably would have been funny if it were faster paced, less predictable, and had better payoff. Stanley eventually ends up in a cave under a bridge, where, scared by his ordeal, he decides to stay, crying himself to sleep on a patch of grass he grows. in a perfect square like its sod. Impressive. His ability to control magic enough that he can cast it in perfect shapes, I mean. Not the fact that he's breaking down and saying he's quitting when the plot's barely begun at the 15-minute mark of this 75-minute movie?!
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
You mean to tell me this movie has wasted so much time on the filler, Gnorga's song, Lord's speech impediment, the chase scene, that we're already 20% of the way in, and all that's happened that's important to the plot is that Stanley's been sent to Central Park? My god, this movie's like a bag of potato chips! It's always more hair than chip! And unfortunately, it ain't gonna get any better, especially considering the story's gone this far without introducing two of its main characters. Those characters being Gus, the bratty troublemaker, because every early 90s family film has to have one, and Rosie, his baby sister whose only character trait is being cute.
Hey, Rosie, don't touch that! Only me and Dad get to go. Go. This is just for me and Dad.
Gus is upset because of the same reason every kid in a 90s movie is upset, because his parents, voiced by Haley Mills and Jonathan Pryce, have important jobs to do that are cutting into time he wants to spend with them.
The park will have to come later.
Later. It always has to be later. Why can't we ever do what I want to do? I want to do what I want to do.
And let me just say that I'm glad we've largely moved away from this trope, which TV Tropes calls When You Comin' Home, Dad, after a lyric in Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin. Because I think even most children understand that their parents' jobs pay for their basic needs, as well as everything else they get from them. Sure, it's understandable for them to be sad when their parents are too busy with their jobs to make time for them, but it's better than them ending up in poverty and probably even separated from their parents by the services. It's like vaccines. They hurt in the moment to prevent the immeasurably worse disease. Point I'm trying to make is, this trope of a parent's job causing conflict with the family was a bad trope to begin with, and I'm glad it doesn't pop up much anymore. In fact, the most recent time I can think of that any piece of media even came close to this trope was Big Sid Greens' Night Bill back in 2019, over half a decade ago. And even there, Cricket and Tilly stated they'd rather have their father working only his job as a farmer than see him also take on that office job for the new luxuries of the city.
If we have to choose between having you around or fancy new things, we choose you.
Although, the stuff is pretty great, too. I mean, man, do I love the new backs. And those donuts were... But Dad, yes, I choose Dad. Definitely Dad.
See, that's how you do that trope right, by playing it any other way than straight. Man, Big City Greens has so many examples of good trope usage. I'd love to talk more about them, but we still have this shitty movie to get through. Oh, and I forgot to say, since this movie's set in New York, that of course means the Welsh and English Pryce and Mills attempt American accents for their characters.
You know I have an important case to prepare for. The park will have to come later.
Your father works very, very hard to make our life nice, children. Now, you have to learn to appreciate that.
And I feel like I owe Sam Palladio an apology for criticizing his own tepid American accent in Strange Magic. His accent was bad too, I stand by that. But Pryce and Mills here, their accents really are not fooling anyone. These characters are clearly voiced by British people attempting an accent that is outside their skills as actors. And before you try to tell me, it's a transatlantic accent like Rarity. This video is being worked on at the same time as a video on Friendship is Magic, so that show's pretty fresh in my mind. And let me say that it's heavily implied in the show, if not outright shown, that her accent is fake.
I am not whining. I am complaining. Do you want to hear whining? This is whining. Oh, this harness is too tight. It's going to chafe. Can't you loosen it? Oh, it hurts and it's so nasty.
Not to mention she didn't even have the accent as a filly.
A rock? That's my destiny? What is your problem, Horn? I followed you all the way out here for a rock?
What I'm trying to say is, transatlantic my ass. Pryce and Mills here are just doing bad American accents. Anyways, Gus manages to fool the maid with a sign on his bedroom door. That's badly spelled even by badly spelled sign standards. How the f*** do you get the idea that there's an S in keep? And sneaks out with Rosie to Central Park. Meanwhile, this hydrox of a squirrel to Scrat's Oreo chases their acorn to the bridge Stanley's staying under. Okay, if the acorn's that big compared to Stanley, I think it'd paint the grass with his head. Also, if it sounds like I'm complaining about filler that doesn't matter to the story, well, the movie's not giving me much of a choice. That's because this movie, which has thus far treated its story as bad comedy, bad musical numbers, characters being cute, characters sticking around, fifth priority, at best, is about to spend even more time on its inane filler. After the beginning of the shot in which the squirrel is chasing Acorn, we see Gus and Rosie play with a boat, Rosie getting distracted by a butterfly and chasing it under the bridge, Stanley giving the squirrel their acorn and going to get more, Rosie mistaking Stanley for her plush doll and nearly drowning him. I think we can all agree it would have been funny if she actually did and the movie ended right there. Stanley running off after Rosie sees she's holding him, Gus chasing after Rosie after he sees her wading through the stream, and then finally the next plot important thing happens, that being Rosie taking the slide down to where Stanley is hiding. All of what I described, to the beginning of the shot of Rosie arriving in the cave, takes 3 minutes and 37 seconds. Almost 5 goddamn % of the movie. Point I'm trying to make is, if it sounds like I'm skipping over important story beats, I can assure you I'm not. If anything, I'm covering too much of it, because the movie really is that f***ing empty. No review of Troll in Central Park can properly illustrate how dull it is, how much it stretches out its runtime with pointless filler. You really have to see the movie for yourself to know how much of a slog it is. So Stanley and Rosie meet in the cave, and after one of his flowers gets rid of a ladybug she's scared of, I didn't think anyone other than Nathan suffered from coccinellidae phobia, but okay. She shows her gratitude to him by kissing him and... So Stanley decides that being cowardly and creepy isn't enough reason to hate him. He also wants to be annoying by breaking out into song.
Picture a perfect place where there is no doom and gloom. Birds singing happy songs and flowers bursting into bloom.
I warned you. I'm coming, Elizabeth!
Maybe 'cause no one's concentrating on it. Just give it love and kindness and see how green it grows.
Whatever species of flower reacts like Stanley does at being kissed by a toddler, I hope they get eaten to extinction by those man-eating plants from the Crash Bandicoot games. And Stanley too. Gus eventually makes it into the cave himself along with many of Central Park's fauna. Stanley initially reacts to Gus's arrival with fear, even having his bioluminescent flowers dim to set the mood the movie thinks someone somewhere will take seriously.
My boat!
You did not need to paint 2 different backgrounds for this shot movie. You could have just adjusted the exposure in post. And don't tell me you don't have the technology to do that even on this cell animated film. You have a CG shot later in the film. If you have access to CG, you have access to exposure alteration. Gus, being the brat that he is, blames Rosie for breaking his boat, and she starts crying when he gets into an argument with Stanley. She's still unhappy even after she's given her bottle, however, so the flowers put on a dance number to cheer her up. Wait, play that shot again. Yep, that's the movie. That's the movie summed up in one shot. This movie is as entertaining as watching someone clap along and smile dopely like a toddler to bright colors and music, and produces the same feeling, that you can't wait for it to stop. Of course, even toddlers are too old for this movie.
Sperm to
Rosie is of course cheered up from the dance number, while Gnorga, who had been eavesdropping to see how Stanley is faring with his punishment, does not take kindly to seeing her positive change in mood. But upon seeing how much of a brat Gus is as he reacts to Stanley's attempt to fix his boat, she casts a spell on him to make him cry uncontrollably.
It's not so bad. I think it looks quite... floor adorable.
Ugh, don't hold your tail like that! Also, Bluth, if you're trying to prove that you didn't need Disney, then, maybe don't blatantly copy scenes from films of their animated canon. Or cast an actress whose best known work is for their live-action films. Gus manages to break the spell, though, when he sees Rosie drowning and dives in to save her.
Stanley! Do something!
I don't think Stanley's gonna be much of help, Gus. His thumb grows flowers, not... boats. Okay, remember when I said earlier that the thumb powers are going to be a bigger problem with the story later on? Well, here it is. The movie doesn't stick to its own rules about the thumb powers, and will make them up for the sake of plot convenience. In this case, having Stanley be able to also grow toy boats life-size on top of the previously established sentient flowers. This could have easily been fixed by having Stanley grow, oh I don't know, a vine being carried by the birds, or perhaps a sentient maple seed. You know, the ones that look like helicopter blades. It looks stupid and the movie still would have sucked, but at least that particular scene would feel less contrived, and tie into what we already know about Stanley. But no, this movie's not smart enough to have that kind of writing. It instead takes the easy way out by making up a power for Stanley on the spot, and leaves us the audience resenting their survival. With me in particular wishing our so-called heroes would just go over a waterfall as a heavenly light shines above them. Oh yes, wish granted!
No way. This is my dream, and nobody gets hurt in my dreams.
Buy a monkey's paw! Go off! So Stanley shows his idea of a dream via a sappy musical number, before giving Gus the opportunity to show his own idea of a dream via an action sequence of him speeding away from an exploding pirate ship in a life-size version of his toy boat. As you already guessed, none of this contributes to any actual story, and only serves to bore the audience to sleep.
That was more like a nightmare.
As well as the characters, apparently. Cotton candy?
Its water-soluble properties make a mockery of my existence.
Oh, right. Anyways, Gnorga is also tired of how little is happening in this movie, so she transports herself and Lort to New York via a tornado, which wreaks havoc in Central Park, leaving it a barren wasteland. Gus and Rosie wake up to the devastation when they exit the cave.
Wow. What happened?
The movie finally decided to have conflict. 50 minutes in. Also, where'd the giant brambles come from? Did Gnorga grow them because she thought that the felled and barren trees weren't enough to set the mood? She needed to make Central Park look like the bramble levels from DKC2? Because even with the overly vibrant shade of orange lighting the scene, we can tell that the tornado was something bad that happened. Gnorga and Lort pursue the kids through the choppily zooming background and manage to capture Rosie. Gus and the forest animals go to get help from Stanley, who, even after a rabbit puts their feet in his ass, is too much of a coward to do so.
Yo, but what can I do?
What about all your powers, mister? You gotta believe, Green Thumb.
I'd help you if I could, but I can't. She'll turn me into stone, and I don't want to be recognized.
Petrified. The word is petrified. Look into a dictionary. It'll do you good.
You know what, Stanley? You'll never have a dream come true because you're too scared to fight for what you believe in. You're a coward!
You know things are bleak when you find yourself agreeing with the kid who's been nothing but a whiny little brat the entire movie. Heartbreaking. The worst character I know just made a great point. Stanley has been a coward this entire time, and I hate that it had to be such an unlikable character that had to be the one to say it. Gus goes to save Rosie himself, to which Gnorga retaliates by turning him to a troll with a petrifying thumb like hers that she can also control with her own thumb. Because as previously established, that's how little story this movie has. It can't advance without pulling a new thumb power out of its ass.
Good night, everybody.
Oh, and Rosie runs away from Lort only to fall off the ledge. Yeah, she's still alive, she's still alive, she's still alive, skip to the next shot, please. Yeah, see, she's still alive. Saved by Stanley, who finally decided, after approximately 47 minutes and 43 seconds of this 75-minute, 20-second movie, that he was done hiding in the cave. Around 63% of the movie. And yes, by the way, my estimates do include the credits, so it takes up even more of the story. Again, you have to see this movie for yourself to understand how much of a slog it is. But I hope that with my math, rough though it may be, you get a better idea than from others who have covered this film before me, just how much time it wastes on anything other than story or character development. Anyway, Stanley gets into a thumb wrestling match with Gnorga, managing to overpower her and grow flowers on her body, before he and the kids escape on the flying boat. No, I did not just tell you the result of a Mad Lib, that is exactly what happens. The flowers sprout slowly enough, however, for Gnorga to manipulate Gus's troll thumb to touch Stanley, turning him to stone, before she turns fully into a rosebush herself. Okay, I'm pretty sure being dropped from that height, Stanley's body would be shattered to pieces, no matter how light the trash in that can was. But no, this is a shitty animated film from the 90s, so you know this has to be a fake out even more egregious and contrived than what it just did with Rosie. Gus turns back into a human and gets into bed just as his parents come home from their spree of first-degree employment to see him mourning the troll he'd only known for a day and had in his good graces for barely over a minute by sucking his thumb. The next day, Gus and Rosie's parents decide they don't need to provide for their family and take them to the park where they leave Stanley's body, and the movie decides to make the thumb powers even more complicated. You can tell that even the writers gave up on trying to tell a decent story by this point. They knew they were in the home stretch of whatever draft they were in, probably the first, and just wanted it off their minds as soon as possible. And I don't blame them. Anyway, Stanley uses a sloppy effect, I'm gonna guess it's chroma key from the artifacts left over from a lack of D-spill, to restore Central Park, and everyone lives happily ever at... Huh?
Marge, I'm confused. Is this a happy ending or a sad ending?
What even is this ending? This whole movie has been a saccharine snooze fest, and now suddenly, this is how it ends? This is his idea of a happy ending. Stanley's powers spreading across the Big Apple and leaving it look like nature has reclaimed the remains of human civilization after some apocalyptic event has broken out. That's what this movie thinks ending on an uplifting note is? Even if you want to make the argument Stanley's turned the city as some green utopia that incorporates nature into its design, I've seen people call this aesthetic solar punk. As someone who designs the settings in their graphic novel to be a hybrid between nature and modern architecture, it's a balancing act. You want to get somewhere between Tabletown and Little Bark Grove, skewing Tabletown for something more urban and Little Bark Grove for something more rural. When you're at the point where flowers are growing on the cars and you can't even make out the Art Deco details of the Chrysler building, you're drawing a post-apocalypse. Watching this ending, I'm not left with the feeling that everyone lived happily ever after. I'm left with the feeling that Stanley has taken over the world, destroyed mankind, and his sentient flowers, possibly with any surviving humans as their slaves, are rebuilding a new civilization in a vision resembling Rainbow Dash's nightmare. In which case, Stanley and the flowers better hope that no human that survives is a vegetarian. And that was Troll in Central Park. It's awful. You knew before watching this video that it was awful, the crew knew while making it that it was awful, and the execs of the studios whose Switch chains distributing it knew it was awful. MGM wouldn't take a chance distributing it, Warner Brothers distanced themselves from it when they distributed it, and even when the rights of the film eventually ended up with Fox, they plastered Warner Brothers' logo with that of their home entertainment division instead of their main studio logo. Or at least they did on the print that I watched. What I'm trying to say is, this movie has more than earned its notorious reputation. Not a likable or well-written character in sight, barely a story to be found, and a sickeningly sugary tone like straight drink enhancer. If you know, you know. As I said earlier, Bluth has since admitted that Troll in Central Park was a mistake, but funnily enough, it doesn't seem to be the movie he's most ashamed of. The following year would see the release of his next movie, The Pebble and the Penguin. While that movie would do better than Troll critically and financially, not that that's saying much at all, Bluth was embarrassed enough by how that film turned out to go uncredited as its director. If only he thought to do that for Troll in Central Park. For while Bluth's earlier works such as Secretive Nim and An American Tale are as beautiful as the most vibrant roses of a garden, Troll in Central Park is ugly like a weed, emerging from a crack in the floor of an abandoned blockbuster. And now it is time for the Bingo bango. If you would like to support this channel on a monetary level, then drop a donation at kofi.com/AdlerBOG. Monthly donors will get access to exclusive perks, such as donation credits in my videos and early access to completed OTalk chapters. Vielen Dank!
off! That's just lazy!